Hey guys, SuperHorrorBro Mike here, and in today's Deltarune theory, we take a look at a particular character who may tie the strange world of Deltarune to the equally bizarre world of Undertale. Many people have speculated if Deltarune could be a prequel or sequel to one of Undertale's many possible endings. After all, certain locations seem similar and characters the same, although their behaviour is often uncharacteristic and unusual. My personal theory, which I will expand on in a future video, is that the world of Deltarune is an alternate dimension of sorts, potentially existing alongside Undertale's, but with events unfolding and characters living their lives differently. However, one creature ties these two worlds together, and his name is Sans. For those of you who have not played Undertale, Sans was a skeletal figure and part of the monster realm. He appeared to help the player at certain moments throughout their quest, and depending on whether you chose to play as a pacifist or as a genocidal maniac, he would either aid or hinder your progress. If the player killed all other monsters in the underworld, then Sans would end up fighting them to the death, but eventually lost the battle and was slain. However, he never actually dies on screen, and upon returning to the surface world during the closing moments of Deltarune Chapter 1, Chris comes face to face with a character who sure seems to resemble Sans in the middle of town. He even stands outside of a store called Sans. And what's more interesting to note about this particular character is that his personality and mannerisms actually do resemble the version of him we encountered during our time in the world of Undertale. Our first piece of evidence to suggest this is in fact the same Sans who appeared in Toby Fox's previous game. But it goes a little deeper than that when we look at some other connecting pieces of evidence throughout the two games. The first is the concept of fast travel, or time travel. Throughout Undertale, Sans mentions time travel and seems to imply he has travelled this way before. And we know he is capable of time shifting. At times, he appears to be able to almost teleport around, and even does this during portions of our battle against him on a genocide run. A character with the ability to travel in this way could, conceivably, also have the ability to move between different dimensions, or alternate universes if you will. Also, take a look at the doors in Deltarune. These portals allow Chris and his gang to instantly travel between areas in the game, but unlike fast travel in most games, it is suggested that these doors are literally teleporting the character about in an instant, the same way Sans moves about in Undertale. And of course, the biggest piece of evidence in relation to these very distinct looking doors is that we see one in Sans' house, and it is the entrance to his bedroom no less. The only door in Undertale like this, but a common form of travel within Deltarune's underworld. This once again hints at Sans originating from this world and being the same character who appears in Undertale. Next, we must turn to Sans' secret room found within Undertale. In this room found behind his house, we discover a picture album along with the statement, "There are photos of Sans with a lot of people you don't recognise. He looks happy." This hints towards Sans existing in a different place and perhaps a different timeline altogether, one with different characters, the ones we find in the world of Deltarune. In Deltarune, Sans also makes mention of having a little brother, which could quite easily be Papyrus, although he is never confirmed by name, so it could be a different character altogether. More interesting still is the blueprint we discover in this room. It looks like the same blueprint Lancer presents to us in Deltarune when talking about building a thrashing machine. Could this be the exact same document? It seems likely, as also within this room we discover a sketch featuring 3 characters. The figures in this sketch may well have been the Fun Gang, Chris, Susie, and Ralsei. And why would this be? Well, on the back of this sketch is a message, and the message reads, "Don't forget." And what lines do we hear during the end credits song for Deltarune?
Don't forget, I'm with you in the dark.
So this seems to point towards Sans having met the Fun Gang in Deltarune at some point, and also to have obtained their blueprints. Perhaps in future Deltarune chapters, Sans will work with the player to create this thrashing machine. Who knows? But it does seem to confirm Deltarune's story took place before Undertale, and that this Sans is in fact the same across both games. You may raise the point that this timeline doesn't seem to fit. After all, we are told that Undertale takes place in 2010 and that Deltarune takes place in 2020. But it is important to remember that the date we are given for Undertale is simply when Kara originally fell from the surface world into the underworld, and not when the events of the actual game we play took place. We have no definitive timescale for how many years later the story of our character unfolds, and so it may be that Sans entered this realm many years after the monsters were originally banished by the humans, in which case Deltarune and its universe may well take place before the events we experience in Undertale. But again, this is just a theory. It's also worth noting that there are references to do with ketchup in Deltarune, and we all know how much Sans loved ketchup in Undertale. This is a smaller point to be sure, but it is still worth mentioning as it relates directly to the traits of his character. The final piece of the puzzle comes from analysing Sans himself and comparing his physical qualities to that of both the darkness of Deltarune's world and the monsters of Undertale's. The most interesting thing we learnt from our time with Chris and the Fun Gang in Deltarune was that according to a key scene between them and Lancer, darkners are able to bleed. While this is part of a comical exchange where Lancer brings a bucket to collect the blood of his opponents, it is never contested by any of them, which suggests darkners do in fact bleed, as Lancer expects to collect blood because he knows his race can bleed. If this is true, then it presents us with one of the most defining pieces of evidence for this theory. Sans is a character originally from this world, and in fact, a darkner himself. You see, he is the only character in Undertale who bleeds when he is cut. The monsters simply evaporate into dust, and we know monsters turn to dust after they die from books found in the monster library within Snowdin. So Sans being able to bleed means it is impossible for him to be a monster, but likely he is a darkner, and this is only reinforced by point number 2. If you battle darkners in Deltarune, they grow tired and eventually fall asleep during battle. It is even how the King of the Darkness himself is defeated, and it is also the only way to defeat Sans in Undertale. He eventually grows too tired to battle any longer and falls asleep, allowing the player to defeat him. All of these traits are synonymous with darkness and totally out of character for a monster, which means it is very likely Sans is in fact a darkner himself and only a visitor in the realm of Undertale after leaving his original home in Deltarune behind. Why would he do this? Well, unfortunately, to answer that question, we will have to wait for the full release of Deltarune, but hopefully this theory has given you something to consider in the meantime. And that's it for today's video. Please remember to give it a like if you did enjoy watching, and maybe drop a comment too, as well as subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications so you never miss an upload. This channel specializes in variety horror content, including creepypasta readings, horror gaming facts and theories, and general interest pop culture horror videos. So if you're interested in all things spooky, you'll find something to enjoy here at SuperHorrorBro. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next video.